let's just say we do confront alien life. And how do you think our current the current Trump administration would deal with that?
Well, so there is a fundamental question of whether the government has any data or materials that may represent objects that arrived at Earth. Because there were three reports delivered to Congress by the Director of National Intelligence about unidentified anomalous phenomena, where military personnel report about objects that they cannot identify. And if these are human made, then these reports signal weakness of the intelligence agencies. They just do not do their job, despite the huge amounts of funds that are paid for the defense budget. And so that's obviously one possibility. That these are objects manufactured by adversarial nations that we are not aware of. And there was an object like that, the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down a couple of years ago. And so it may well be that there are new technologies developed by other nations, but the alternative is that maybe there is something from out of this earth that is not human-made and it's still technological. And of course, for that to be clear, we need the data. Now, if the government has some data that they collected over decades or materials, as some whistleblowers claim, there were some congressional hearings in which various people, including David Grush, argued that there are programs within the US government for retrieval and reverse engineering of material from crash sites, including even functional devices, the claim was. And, I can easily imagine that such programs exist just because we want to get information about crash sites of flying objects manufactured by adversarial nations. Now, the only question is, did they find anything that is not human-made, that represents non-human intelligence? And the claim by those whistleblowers is yes, but I haven't seen direct evidence for that. And it may well be that if such materials were collected, they're being held by corporations outside government, like Lockheed Martin or others. And if such evidence exists, I very much hope that the new administration, just like President Trump issued an executive order to release information about the JFK assassination, that in the same way, there would be disclosure of information that has no significance for national intelligence, but has huge significance for us scientifically, about any findings that may represent technologies not from this earth. And it's relatively straightforward to separate human-made technologies from anything beyond this earth. There is a very simple way of doing that. If I had access to such materials, you can just check the composition of the material and date it using radioactive isotopes. All the materials that made the solar system have the same age, about 4.6 billion years. Something that came from another star should have a different age, because stars span a wide range of ages. Most of them are a few billion years older than the sun. So most likely you would find an age that exceeds the age of the solar system. If you were to use uranium or thorium, these are isotopes. I mean, thorium has thorium-232 has a half-life that is equal to the age of the universe, 14 billion years. Whereas uranium-238 has a half-life comparable to that of the solar system. So just by measuring the relative abundances of these isotopes and their decay products, you can tell, you can date the material. And so I would be able, within a relatively short time to tell you, if you give me materials, what's the age of that material and whether it came from outside the solar system. And so that's not difficult. Now, of course, if you see some technologies, evidence for technologies, it would be even clearer if those are human-made, because we pretty much know the limits of our technologies.
Also, Professor Loeb, I wanted to ask, could alien life exist in forms entirely different from carbon-based organisms? And how would we even begin to detect such life forms?
Definitely, we know about life that we see here on Earth. That's the only place where we found evidence for life, and it's based on very specific chemistry in liquid water, and it requires amino acids and so forth. And very interestingly, recently, material was retrieved from an asteroid called Bennu that was produced in the main asteroid belt as a result of some object impacting a protoplanet that was there. Okay, and so breaking it up, and Bennu is a piece of that original protoplanet, and what we so the unusual thing about it is that a mission was sent, OSIRIS-REx was sent to land on Bennu and extract the material from it and deliver it back to Earth. And that happened, and the material was analyzed, and the results were announced just over the past month. And they found amino acid, most of the amino acids that are used as building blocks in life on Earth existed on this rock. And that is amazing. That implies that the building blocks of life were very common. You know, the amino acids that were used on Earth probably came to Earth as a result of impacts by asteroids like Bennu, or developed on Earth independently. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that Mars was very similar to Earth. It had an atmosphere, it had liquid water on the surface. It actually cooled before Earth because it's a smaller body, so it had a larger surface per unit mass, and therefore, you know, the heat content is proportional to mass, and the cooling rate is proportional to the surface area. And Mars just had faster cooling relative to the amount of heat that it included, and so it cooled before Earth, and developed probably. It's very likely that it developed chemistry similar to that of Earth because it had very similar environment to that of Earth, and that was
Uh-huh.
around the time when there were lots of impacts of big objects, and it's possible that rocks were chipped off Mars that carried in their core life, Martian life, microbes that were delivered to Earth. And so we might all be Martians. And when Elon Musk talks about bringing humans to Mars, it's just like going back to our childhood home, if that was the case. And, you know, another possibility to keep in mind is, so this is called panspermia, where rocks can deliver tiny astronauts in the form of microbes. You know, those tiny astronauts preceded Elon Musk by 4.5 billion years or so. So they managed to do the trip from Mars to Earth much, much earlier than we hope to do back there. But in addition to that, you can imagine a gardener, some interstellar gardener, you know, that decided Earth is a planet where biological life could potentially blossom, and they put some seeds of the type of life that they want to see on Earth, and then we have what we have right now. And that is more difficult to infer in retrospect. I mean, if you look at complex life like humans, you know, that we have a lot of qualities that are quite amazing. You know, just think about, compared to AI systems that we currently have, the large language models, they require gigawatts just to operate a neural network that is 100 times smaller in terms of the number of parameters than the human brain, which requires only 20 watts of power. And it's remarkable. Now, of course, we might supersede the human brain, but I'm just saying that nature was able to produce such a complex system. And actually, the human brain evolved to the size that it has. It didn't evolve beyond that size because it's already using 20% of the energy metabolism of the human body, so it couldn't really grow because of the power constraints. However, in principle, AI, especially after DeepSeek, we can imagine that perhaps we might be able to develop more efficient large language models that use reasoning that would resemble the human mind better, and maybe we will eventually have a system that is more complex than the human brain, that has even more parameters than human brain, which in my view, once we get to that point, we would see emergent phenomena like consciousness, free will. These are the signatures of systems that are extremely complex. So when they respond to an environment that is not fully known, you see that they are not predictable. And that's what humans are. Now, one thing I wanted to comment is that if we ever encounter alien intelligence, which is also AI, by the way, alien intelligence, I would much rather have psychologists on my team than physicists, because they are used to dealing with intelligent systems, humans, and they would be better at interpreting what we are interacting with. So if you ask me what do I imagine, so in terms of life, it could be very different than we have, or it could be that there is this path to, using amino acids, to the kind of life we have on Earth. One thing we need to keep in mind, all life forms on Earth have the same chirality. So amino acids, for example, are left-handed. Chirality is the way the molecules are organized, the structure of the molecules, and the way they interact with polarized light. So in principle, you can have them either right-handed or left-handed, but somehow this symmetry between right-handed and left-handed was broken on Earth. On Bennu, the amino acids had equal number of right-handed and left-handed amino acids. So that shows you that the starting conditions allow for both. If we ever meet a biological creature from an exoplanet, we should be really careful not to shake their hand, because if they're made of mirror life, in other words, the opposite chirality, our body is unable to protect itself against any microbes or viruses or things that relate to mirror life. This is also a cautionary remark about Mars. When we go there, it could have been that mirror life evolved there, and we need to be really careful. There was just a month ago, there was an article in Science magazine by 38 experts who warned against doing experiments with mirror life, not generating mirror life on Earth with the opposite chirality, because it could be extremely dangerous. My point is that, asteroids could have delivered mirror life in the past. Somehow, life that we have was resilient to those deliveries. We sort of ignored these packages. So, we should not be too alarmed. But nevertheless, we should be careful when we go places not to interact with mirror life.